My sister mocked my wife's infertility at Thanksgiving dinner, said we'd never understand real family. Everyone just sat there, until my mom stood up, slammed her fork down, and said, "Then tell them who really raised your son." She went deathly panicking. I, 32M, sat at that Thanksgiving table thinking this would finally be the year we'd get through dinner without drama. My wife squeezed my hand under the table, that small gesture she does when she's trying to stay calm. We'd been married 5 years, spent 3 of them trying for a baby, and the fertility treatments had drained us in every way possible. My sister sat across from us, her son playing on a tablet beside her, barely looking up from his device. She'd been making subtle digs all evening, nothing I could directly call out, just those comments that land like tiny cuts. The kind where if you react, you're the one being sensitive. The turkey had just been carved when she started. Someone mentioned our recent vacation, just the 2 of us to Colorado, and my sister laughed in that particular way she has. She said something about how nice it must be to have all that freedom, all that disposable income, how she couldn't imagine a life without her son giving it meaning. The table got quiet for a moment. Then someone changed the subject to football. My wife's grip on my hand tightened. I looked at her face and saw that blank expression she wears when she's holding back tears. We'd talked about this before coming, prepared ourselves for potential comments, but preparation doesn't make it hurt less. My sister wasn't done though. She never is once she starts. After the first round of food, when people were settling in and getting comfortable, she launched into this whole speech about motherhood. How it changes you, completes you, how you can't truly understand family until you've held your own child. She went on about the bond between mother and son, how nothing else in life compares. My wife excused herself to the bathroom. I watched her go, saw the slight tremor in her shoulders, and something hot and angry settled in my chest. But I didn't say anything. Nobody did. My father kept eating. My uncle stared at his plate. My sister's husband looked uncomfortable but stayed silent. When my wife came back, her eyes were red, but she smiled and took her seat. My sister barely paused her monologue. She talked about play dates and school events, about being room mom, about how exhausted she was, but how worth it all was. Every word felt deliberate, aimed. Then she turned to us directly. She said she felt sorry for people who'd never experienced real family, never know what it meant to be truly needed, to matter in that fundamental way. She looked right at my wife when she said it. Said some people just weren't meant to understand these things, and that was okay. They could focus on their careers and their hobbies and their vacations instead. The table went dead silent. My wife's hand went limp in mine. I opened my mouth, not even sure what I was going to say, just knowing I had to say something, anything. That's when my mother stood up. The movement was so sudden her chair scraped loudly against the floor. She picked up her fork and slammed it down on her plate with a crack that made everyone jump. The sound echoed in the silence. My mother looked at my sister with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. Cold and hard, and something else, something that made my sister's smug smile falter. Mom asked her if she really wanted to do this now, if she really wanted to have this conversation in front of everyone. My sister tried to laugh it off, said she didn't know what Mom was talking about, but her voice had gone thin and high. Her husband sat up straighter, suddenly paying attention. Mom asked my sister again, very slowly and clearly, if she wanted to tell everyone the truth about her son, about who really raised him, about where she was during those first 2 years of his life. My sister went white, actually white, like all the blood had drained from her face. She started stammering, trying to interrupt, but Mom just kept talking. She said that since my sister wanted to talk about real family and real motherhood so badly, maybe she should start with the truth. That when my nephew was born, my sister lasted 3 months before she had what the doctors called a severe postpartum episode. That she'd left him with Mom and Dad and disappeared for almost 2 years. I sat there frozen. My wife's hand had gone rigid in mine. This was news to us. To everyone at the table except my parents and my sister's husband, apparently, whose face had gone carefully blank. Mom continued in this terrible calm voice. She said she and Dad had raised my nephew from 3 months to 2 years old. They'd done the night feedings, the diaper changes, the first steps, the first words. They'd been the ones he called for in the night. My sister had been in treatment facilities, then halfway houses, then just gone, working through whatever she needed to work through. My sister tried to speak, but nothing came out. Her hands were shaking. Her husband put his hand on her arm, but she shook him off. Mom said she'd never judged my sister for it, never held it against her. Mental health was real and serious and nothing to be ashamed of. They'd supported her recovery, welcomed her back, helped her rebuild her relationship with her son. They'd never told anyone because it was private. It was her story to tell or not tell. But Mom's voice went hard when she said that didn't give my sister the right to sit at this table and mock someone else's pain. Didn't give her the right to lecture anyone about motherhood or family or what makes a person valuable. Not when she knew exactly what it felt like to be unable to care for a child, to feel like a failure as a mother, to wonder if she'd ever be whole again. The silence that followed was absolute. My nephew had stopped playing on his tablet and was looking around at all of us with wide eyes. Someone's glass of wine sat forgotten, tipped at an angle. My sister finally found her voice. She said Mom had promised never to tell anyone, that they'd agreed. Her voice was panicky and sharp. Mom said that was before my sister decided to weaponize her second chance at motherhood against someone who was still fighting for their first chance. That was before she decided to be cruel. My sister stood up so fast her chair fell backward. She grabbed her son's hand and told her husband they were leaving. He looked torn, glancing between her and the rest of us. But he stood up too. They made it to the door before my sister turned back. She said Mom had no right, that those years were the darkest of her life, that she'd worked so hard to move past them. Her voice broke on the last words. Mom said she knew that, said she understood that, but my sister needed to understand something too. Being a mother wasn't about biology or carrying a child or even raising one from birth. It was about showing up, about choosing love every day, about making someone feel safe and valued. And by that measure, my wife was already more of a mother than my sister had given her credit for, just in how she loved and supported everyone around her. My wife started crying then, quiet tears running down her face. I pulled her close and she buried her face in my shoulder. My sister left, actually left, taking her husband and son with her. The door slammed, and we all just sat there in the wreckage of Thanksgiving dinner. After a long moment, my father cleared his throat and said someone should check on the pie. My uncle started gathering plates like nothing had happened. But everything had happened, and we all knew it. Mom sat back down heavily. She looked at my wife and me and said she was sorry, that she shouldn't have let it go on as long as she did. That she'd promised herself years ago that if anyone ever made my wife feel less than because of the fertility struggles, she'd shut it down. But she'd been caught off guard by my sister's cruelty. My wife got up and hugged my mother for a long time. Neither of them said anything, but I saw Mom's shoulders shaking. Update 1. The next few days were chaos. My sister called my parents repeatedly, furious, saying they'd destroyed her life, that her husband was questioning everything now, that she'd never forgive them. My mother didn't answer most of the calls. When she did, she just repeated that the truth was the truth, and maybe my sister should spend less time attacking others and more time examining why she felt the need to do it. My wife and I talked for hours that night after we got home. She'd known something was off with my sister's motherhood story because there were years of family photos where my nephew was only ever with my parents. But she'd assumed it was just them being involved grandparents. The full truth hit her hard. But something else came out of it too. My wife said that what my mother had said about motherhood, about it being a choice and an action rather than biology, had unlocked something in her. We'd been so focused on fertility treatments, on the biological path, that we'd closed ourselves off to other options because we were scared of failing at those too. We started researching adoption, then fostering. The conversations were tentative at first, both of us scared to hope too much, but they grew stronger. There were kids out there who needed parents. Maybe we could be what they needed. Maybe family could look different than we'd imagined. Update 2. 3 weeks after Thanksgiving, my sister showed up at my parents' house. I wasn't there, but Mom called me afterward and told me what happened. My sister had come alone, her husband watching their son at home. She'd sat at the kitchen table and cried. She told Mom everything. How the postpartum depression had been so dark and consuming that she genuinely believed her son would be better off without her. How she'd felt like a monster for not feeling the instant connection everyone talked about. How the guilt of those lost years ate at her every day, made her defensive and angry. How she'd built this perfect mother image because she was terrified of anyone finding out the truth. She said that seeing my wife and me struggle with infertility had triggered something in her. Some sick, twisted part of her that wanted to believe her struggle was worse, more valid, that at least she had a child even if she'd failed at first. She knew it was wrong even as she was saying those things at dinner. She just couldn't stop herself. Mom told her she needed therapy, not as an insult, but as a genuine suggestion, that she was still carrying trauma and it was spilling out onto everyone around her. My sister agreed, said she'd already made an appointment. She asked if Mom could give my wife and me her number if it wasn't too late to apologize. Mom said she'd ask us, but we'd decide. Update 3. My sister texted me 2 days later, asked if she could meet with my wife and me, somewhere neutral, somewhere we'd feel safe. My wife was hesitant, but ultimately said yes. We met at a coffee shop on a Saturday morning. My sister looked smaller somehow, tired. She ordered a coffee and barely touched it. She apologized. A real apology, not qualified or explained away. Said what she'd said was cruel and inexcusable. That she'd been projecting her own insecurities and pain onto us. That my wife deserved none of it. She told us her story in full. The postpartum psychosis, the fear, the treatment centers, the slow climb back to stability. How she'd had to relearn how to be around her son, how to trust herself. How my parents had saved both her and her child by stepping in. She said watching us struggle with infertility should have made her more compassionate, not less. That she of all people should have understood how it felt to have your vision of parenthood demolished. She'd just been so busy protecting her secret that she'd turned into the kind of person who hurt others to feel better about herself. My wife listened to all of it, then was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said she appreciated the apology and believed my sister was genuine, but that the words at Thanksgiving had confirmed fears she'd been carrying for years. That she wasn't enough, that she'd never be a real mother, that people secretly pitted her or looked down on her. My sister started crying again, said that wasn't true, but my wife held up her hand. She said the damage was done, and it would take time for trust to rebuild, if it ever did. But she also said she understood pain made people act in ugly ways sometimes. That she hoped my sister got the help she needed. We left it there. Not reconciled exactly, but not completely broken either. My sister is in therapy now. We see her at family events, keep things civil. Her husband apparently insisted on the therapy and on her working through whatever drove her to attack us like that. Their marriage is rocky, but they're trying. Update 4. 8 months after that Thanksgiving, my wife and I were approved as foster parents. We took in a 6-year-old girl whose mother was in rehab and whose father was unknown. She was scared and angry and barely spoke the first week. But slowly, so slowly, she started to open up. She's been with us for 4 months now. We don't know if it'll become adoption or if her mother will get custody back. We're taking it day by day. But when she had a nightmare last week and ran to our room, when she threw her arms around my wife and said she felt safe, I watched my wife hold her and knew this was what family looked like. My mother visits often. She and my wife have grown incredibly close through all of this. Mom's advice on parenting, her steady support, her insistence that love matters more than biology, has been everything. She tells our foster daughter stories about when I was young, includes her in family traditions, treats her exactly like she treats my nephew. My sister still struggles watching it. I can see it in her face at family dinners. But she keeps her comments to herself now. And sometimes I catch her watching my wife with something that might be respect, or might be envy, or might be both. Thanksgiving this year will be different. We'll all be there, including our foster daughter if the placement is still active. Mom's already planning it, making sure there are activities for the kids, making sure everyone feels included. She pulled me aside last week and said she was proud of us, of how we'd turned pain into purpose. My wife says she still thinks about that dinner sometimes, about the moment Mom stood up and everything changed. She says it was the worst and best thing that could have happened. Worst because the cruelty of it still stings. Best because it broke something open, forced conversations that needed to happen, led us down a path we might never have considered otherwise. We still don't know if we'll ever have biological children. The fertility treatments are on hold while we focus on fostering. Maybe we'll try again someday. Maybe we won't. But we're parents now, in the ways that matter. We're showing up, choosing love, making someone feel safe and valued. Exactly like Mom said.